Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. Welcome to ISID Research Seminar Series. Today we have a very interesting topic for the seminar, technology transfer. There is some disturbance coming. So today we have a very interesting topic for the seminar, technology transfer in the Indian medical devices industry. This study is focused on the technology transfer in the case of two medical devices, a blood bag and a mechanical heart valve, from a public-funded institute to private sector firms, and the impact of this technology transfer. Dr. Chidambaram Iyer, the author of the study, will discuss his findings in this session. He is an associate professor at the Center for Development Studies in Kerala. His areas of specialization include innovation and technology, industry, and trade. And we have a highly distinguished panel to comment on this study. Dr. Dilip Kumar Chekuri. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Adult Incubation Center, Niti Aayog Medivali at Andhra Pradesh MedTech Zone, which is the world's first integrated medical devices manufacturing ecosystem. Then we have Dr. Ravi Rathod. He is the technical head at the Association of Indian Medical Device Industry, AMED. He is also the general manager of policy and strategic affairs in Involution Healthcare, which is focused on cardiovascular solutions. K.M. Gopakumar, he is a senior researcher and legal advisor at Third World Network. He was instrumental in getting the courts of India in the pricing of medical devices, and his interventions resulted in some of the medical devices being priced more affordable for the patients. So without spending any more time on the introduction, let us listen to Dr. Chidambaram. The floor is yours, Dr. Chidambaram. You're muted. So you have 30 minutes for presentation.
Sure. Yeah. Is it?
Yeah. It's visible.
It's visible? Yeah. So
yeah.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, am I audible?
You're audible.
Yeah. So thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Nagesh Kumar, the Director of ISID, for giving me this opportunity to present my work in this forum. So this work actually stems from my, into 25 years back, I was an R&D engineer in Reliance. So at that point of time, I did lab experiments, something similar to what I will discuss today. So I was always curious to understand how lab experiments affect the whole economy. So this idea was placed in I think in the year 2000 when I was working as an R&D engineer. So I always wanted to do something on this. So luckily, in 2015, I got some framework in which I could base this, and I got some time in the last couple of years to work on this. So this is my personal motivation, because being a chemical engineer and worked in the chemical industry, I always wanted to know how chemical engineers affect the overall economy. So this, in some sense, gave me an opportunity to do that. So to give some economic background, first of all, we all know that product and process innovation, they influence economic growth through backward and forward linkages and of course demand. And if you look at historically, if you look at it, government research is critical in the sense that the product and process innovation in government research is generally used for further application. So in that sense, the technology transfer is very vital, especially a successful technology transfer. Now, if one wants to understand what technology transfer is, if you look at literature, there are two important components. Like Dosi tells, the knowledge and procedural view tells you that there are two important components. First of all, for a successful transfer, machines, their designs, blueprints have to be successfully transferred, and also the know-how and skills have to be, for the processes and maintenance of the machines, have to be transferred successfully. Given this, how does the literature, international literature, try to understand technology transfer. Most of the literature focuses on agents. Now, what do you mean by agents? Nothing but the recipients, the donors, and if there are any intermediaries. And there are few papers which focus on the technological knowledge. So that's the broad sense of the international literature. But what I will do here is I will use a analytical framework, which is called as the contingent effectiveness model. It's by Bozeman. He has two papers, one in 2000 and one in 2015. I will primarily use the 2001. So what does this tell you? This tells you that the outcome of any technology transfer, success, failure, depends upon characteristics of whom the agent, the one who is transferring the technology, the recipient, the one who is accepting the technology. If you look at the agent, the one who is transferring the technology, their history, their culture, they matter a lot. And also, if you look at the recipients, what are the capabilities, the financial capabilities, the sales, the marketing capabilities of the recipients are also equally important. In addition to these two, there are the intermediaries. In this particular case, there is this one intermediary whom I'm not discussing much, but even the characteristic of the intermediary will also play a role. Then you also have the medium. Now, what do you mean by medium? Whether it's a license, it's a patent, it's a copyright. How is it being transferred? That's very important. What is being transferred? Is it a process? Is it a design? Is it an equipment? So these characteristics play an important role on the outcome of the technology transfer, whether it's a success or a failure. And finally, the most important thing is demand. The higher the demand, more the incentive to succeed, and more the probability of success. Lower the demand, lesser the incentive, and probably lower chances of success. So these features, these characteristics and demand, they determine the outcome, which is typically success or failure. But this outcome can be further, characterized into, transfer agent and recipient impact. So like, have they changed? What the pre and post? What has been their impact? Like before, what were the characteristics? Afterwards, what are the characteristics? That's a feature from the 2015 paper. Then the most important thing which I am focusing in this work is market impact and economic development. Have there been more market activities? Are there more? Is there some kind of economic development? And then what is the intangible addition to the scientific and technical human capital? So these are the three features, in which I will comment upon. There are many more outcomes which is mentioned in the paper, but I will not get into that here. For my work, I am just focusing on these two. And today, typically, I will just focus on the first two. The third one, I'll just mention in passing. Now, having given this analytical framework, I also want to place in context the Indian studies. So far, I've been able to dig up only 5 papers. Now, of these 5 papers, the first two, the 81 and the 84 paper, they have been published in Research Policy, and they, in some sense, they give us insights which tell us more about the nature of characteristics required, which I just mentioned. The other 3 papers, Sridhar Murthy, the ISRO paper, the IIHR paper, and the IIT Bombay paper, they just nothing but give you a trend over time of the number of technology transfers done by each of these institutions. The IIHR paper at least tells you some more information with respect to the incentives that were given, which increase the technology transfer at the technology donor side. Whereas the IIT Bombay paper, they go slightly a step ahead. They talk about 4 particular cases, and they just mention whether it's been success or failure. But none of these papers in the Indian context actually lay out the effect. So what I'm trying to do, or probably add to the literature, is try to give some kind of marker, some kind of what kind of impact happens. So my contribution, I would say, is that just to get a one step forward and give you a hint about, for successful technology transfer, what kind of market impact can one envisage. So now, which are the technologies that I take? So first of all, I need to tell that I have just taken 2 successful technology transfer, blood bag and heart valve. See, I have not taken the unsuccessful with the successful. I have just taken 2 successful technology transfer, blood bag and heart valve, which have been developed by Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute of Medical Sciences and Technology, from a DST, Department of Science and Technology lab based in Trivandrum. So how did I go about it? I did a primary survey wherein I first approached SCTI scientists and my main aim was to look at the market impact and economic development. So my questionnaire was based primarily on that. I spoke to them, then I took their impression about the market impact, economic development, and then I snowballed using snowball technique. I met firms, representatives, and so on. So I did some primary research from February to March, May last year, and then a couple of interviews this year, January. And once I got in some amount of primary information, then I started scouting secondary data, annual reports, books, book chapters, and trade data to support the arguments. So this is the framework that I'm following. Now, before I come to the impact, I will just briefly mention as to I mentioned about characteristics. So now I'll just mention few reasons as to why these two products were a success. The most important thing I would say is the donor. In this case, is the Sri Chitra General Institute, which I'm referring to here as SCTI. Now, if you look at SCTI was established. It's actually a hospital. It started its inpatient services in 1976. In 1980, it was declared as an institute of national importance. And when I mentioned culture and history, well, you can clearly see here that SCTI has a governing body which gave the institute fair amount of independence, and it was able to select and pick the things it could work upon. And its founding director, Professor M.S. Valiadan, a very renowned scientist, rooted its culture. Now, to give some background about Professor Valiadan's work, in the 1960s, he worked at at Johns Hopkins lab in Baltimore, wherein they collaborated. The lab he was working, collaborated with an industrial lab to commercialize what is probably a very famous God shunt. So that inspired him very much to the kind of university and academic linkages that he saw in the US. He was very inspired by that, and he wanted to do something similar once he came back to this country. So in that sense, that history, gave him that inspiration to go ahead, and he, under his supervision, the biomedical technological wing, the BMT of SCTI was established. Now, the aim of BMT, it's written, is that to develop commercially viable technologies as cost-effective import substitute by reverse engineering. So it was embedded in their aim. So their first technology transfer, the blood bag, occurred in 84-85, and till February 2024, they have transferred around 40 technologies. And what's a very, very key point that one has to note is that the scientists, the engineers working at SCT are all encouraged to build upon their human capital, either by taking on more, going for further academic programs, visiting labs, or taking students. So in that sense, they are always kept on their toes, improve their human capital. So this SCTI will be the same for both my blood bag as well as the heart wall. Now, I'll come to the first product, blood bag. So now blood bag is a process innovation. Why do I say it's a process innovation? Because the design was already there. They just got it for the Indian conditions. And to make a small point here, that the initial development was actually for a more complex product called as oxygenator, but they realized that the demand for oxygenator may not be much, so that's why they went for blood bag, which has much more higher demand. So now I need to say that from the time that they got the prototype till they got the final product, which confirmed all the standards, it took them 3 years. So 3 years they had to work on what was relatively a simple technology. So now then they approached NRDC for technology recipients. And here there are multiple recipients. I will just speak about two. Peninsula Polymers, the first recipient. The agreement was signed in 1984-85. And HLL Lifecare, with whom the agreement was signed in 91-92. So now if you look at Peninsula Polymers, it was actually a startup during that time, and it was established by a ex-IAS officer. So this entrepreneur, handpicked a very core team, which was able to overcome a lot of core and experienced team, typically consisting of retired people, who were able to overcome a lot of obstacles. And one of the, if you look at entrepreneurial theory, if the more network the entrepreneurial startup is, the higher the chance of survival. So in some sense, the entrepreneur here did the same thing. He got in as many investors as possible. For example, he approached TTK Pharma to become their sole marketing agent and also made them invest in Peninsula Polymers. So in some sense, he networked and increased the survival rate. The other company to whom the technology was transferred was HLL Lifecare. It was a much more well-established company, and it was actually a leader in latex, rubber and latex technology. And so in some sense, one is a startup for which technology transfer was done in 84, 85. The agreement was signed. The other was a well-established company. And what was the medium? The medium used was licensing, in-house training, person-to-person exchanges, which maximized interaction. And the most key thing was huge demand. So with this incentivized, in some sense, the rate of success. So now, let me come to the first measurement, which is the outcome. So now, impact on SCTI, I have put it in 4 columns. It's intellectual property, product development. They got 1 patent, 1 design registration. During the product development, they also got feedback from clinical trials to around 6 centers. Then for better success, they also created a technology transfer cell. And towards the end of the PenPal process, transfer process, they also created a pilot plan, which they call as a techno-proof facility, wherein they realized that probably we require a pilot plan for more success, increase in the chances of success. What is the scientific and the intangible aspect, the scientific and technology capability? You can measure, you can read that in one of the annual reports where they recognize that the scaling up of the lab process with respect to PenPal was extremely difficult. So SCTI noted that we should probably collaborate with industries as soon as we get an idea and we are getting into the initiation of the lab process. So that was the recognition. So that was an intangible gain that they got. And with respect to, so I say, I'm just rushing through a bit because I think I'll be short of time. So with respect to recognition and monetary gains, the license, they almost got more than 2.5 crores in licensing from the blood bags. So that's in nutshell, very briefly, what I've written more on in the paper, but I'm just mentioning a few. With respect to recipients, PenPal, it improves its production capabilities. Its personnel well trained at SCTI production. It did some amount of initial production at SCTI, and also few of the personnel from SCTI came and worked at PenPal plants. But what's very probably remarkable is the innovation capabilities. Now, if you look at there's another kind of technology transfer in literature where they say that there are 4 kinds of capabilities that's required for a successful technology transfer: investment capabilities, production capabilities, investment capabilities, and linkages. So here, investment capabilities, I'm not mentioning much, but production capabilities, they were able to get it to the mark. Innovation capabilities, they were able to do remarkably. Now, what do I mean by that? They were able to reduce costs. They were able to scale up processes. They were able to develop desired quality inputs. And probably the most important thing is that when the blood work was made, they had an inventory. They soon found out that there was a problem of hygiene. Fungus started growing on the, if you can see this label here, fungus started growing on below the label. So it could no longer be used for blood transfusion. So they had to work on it. They worked almost for a year on it, and they got 3 patents. So basically, because of their innovation capabilities, they got 3 Indian patents, and they successfully overcame that. And then with time, they started ordering custom-made equipments. And they also got a National R&D Award for commercialization of this technology in 1995. And it's the credit to their innovation capability that they developed a production process that increased production using more labor and keeping capital costs low. And this process was used by 8 domestic units in 1995. And this was later replicated in Vietnam after post 1999. So this was the impact on PenPal. Now the HLL, which is 91, 92, if you look at it, the production capabilities, they probably, because they were the second, they learned a lot from the PenPal scaling. There was also deputation of a senior scientist, and another PenPal ex-engineer joined the commissioning of HLL factory. So what happened is that in some sense, the production capabilities were supported by PenPal's learnings. with respect to innovation capabilities, HLL was already an established company. It created lots of PVC formulations, but HLL was more focused on automating the production process. So that's where its innovation capabilities came in. Then it has numerous product innovations, which I'm not getting, which I have a table in the paper. And so much so that it also had consultation services for setting up a blood factory in West Bengal. So now I'll get to the heart of my paper, which is which I think is at least an addition to literature, which is the market impact and economic development. So the most probably one of the key things was backward linkages. So if you look at these backward linkages, you can see that Penpol had vendors for polymer formulation in Western India, and similarly HLL has had more amount of vendors. So in some sense, there are lots of vendor development, and Penpol started vendor development after the technology transfer was signed in 84-85. The production actually started in 87, and by 90 they started vendor development. You can HLL. The point I would like to make here is that point number E in HLL, the automatic label applying machine, which is completely indigenous. It came at 1/4 of the cost of the imported one. So that was the savings that we had, and thus you can understand the kind of interactions that would have happened between engineers of the say Penpol HLL with respect and the technicians or engineers of the vendors, and so much amount of capability would have been increased. So I couldn't measure that, but one can probably guess the amount of capability development that would have happened on both sides. The other key thing was multiplier effects. Now, if you look at multiplier effects, Penpol's on the table on the topmost right-hand side, Penpol's plant cost then was around 2.14 crores. So you can clearly see the amount of demand that would have generated for that plant. HLL's plant cost in 1992 was around 10 crores, of which 7.5 crores was domestic procurement. So that the kind of, this multiplier effects it would have had. And also with time, HLL procured a fully automatic needle machine, which I mentioned, for almost 1.5 crores. So in that sense, all these procurements would have had multiplier effects. If you look at there was not only multiplier effects because of the project investment, you also had multiplier effects because of the production. Now look at the Penpol graph, 87 to 1999. I have stopped at 1999 because in 1999, Terumo Corporation, the world leader in blood packs, took a major stake in Penpol. So that's where I'm stopping my analysis. So if you look at this graph, for every, you can see that it almost reached 5 million production in 1999. And for every 100 rupees of bags sold, it seems salary share of Penpol was 10% and bill of material was around 12 to 15%. So you can clearly, though judge or at least guess the amount of demand that would have generated through linkages. What's very important also here is that Penpol employed majority of the technicians from neighboring villages. It came finally close to Trivandrum, and most of the people in the nearby villages were employed in Penpol. So in some sense, they had incentive in Penpol's success, and also Penpol also invested in the region. So there is another kind of effects, that the secondary or tertiary effects that's happened at the local level. On the right-hand side graph, you can see with respect to HLL, the domestic procurement, the dotted line is quite, it's almost every year it's around more than 80%. So again, that's some kind of multiplier effects that happens. So this is not only the end effect. The other effect is competition. Now, if you look at competition, you have competition from imports and domestic production. So now let's look at competition from imports. So now when Penpol started, at least the agreement was signed in 84, you can see that the cost of one blood bag was 50 rupees. But by 85, 86, when actually this was going on, the commissioning was going on, it came down to 22. And by the time Penpol started production, it came down to 10. So you can see in some sense, Penpol says it was actually dumping. It started a advocacy campaign. So now it helped, their founder was an ex-IAS man, and he was able to pull the right strings, and they got a 40% duty, because in one of the papers that I mentioned earlier, one technology transfer actually was a failure because of too much of imports. But in this case, the characteristic of the recipient successfully navigated the importing hurdle. So in that sense, the ex-IAS officer, the entrepreneur, was able to get some kind of a protection, and the prices rose to 15 to 20. So there's not only competition from imports, there is also domestic production, competition domestic production. So if you look at the graph, HLL's graph, you can see that HLL's average selling price, the right-hand side top, is always come down from 95, 96 to 11. And it's actually a convex combination of exports plus domestic price. And the table, the capacity utilization is negatively correlated with capacity utilization. Now, why is this happening? Because you have to understand that in domestic market, there were high quality bags and low quality bags. So now the graph on the right-hand side, the top right-hand side, I've just tried, that's the only data I got. You can see that there are, I've shown three forms. One is HLL, and then there is TP, which is Thermopenpol, and TTK, which is TTKM, TTK Maersk Medical. So now TTK had a strategy of supplying low-priced bags, whereas both Thermopenpol and HLL wanted to, they went for certification, higher quality bags, so they got a higher ASP, whereas TTP, you can see that the ASP was reducing. So and of course, TTK folded up much later. But what I'm trying to say here is that the domestic market had both high quality bags and low quality bags, and there was very stiff competition, which has been noted in the HLL annual report. Now, if you look at the market share for 2012, Thermopenpol is at 40%. This Polymed and J Mitra, from what I understand, they supplied probably not so high quality bags as TP and HLL. So there was this domestic market competition also that came across. Now, if this was the competition angle, let's look at exports. The blood bags were being exported from this country, and you can see that when HLL started exports, it couldn't export on its own. It had to use a German brand name, so much so that initially nobody, because India was a low income country, it had to be sold under German brand, but with time it could enter lots of markets. Even HLL has entered lots of markets, and as I said, HLL is focused primarily, exports form a significant part of HLL's blood bag sales. And finally, with respect to blood bags, the table on the left hand side down, you can clearly see that India, the HS code 901-89032, we have had almost 2 billion rupees of exports in this category, a large chunk of which is blood bags. So this probably and summarizes the kind of impact the blood bag technology transfer had. Okay, so this is what I would want to say with respect to the blood bags. Now, the next product which I want to focus here is heart wall. Now, if you look at heart wall is actually a much more challenging product. It's an implant. It goes inside your body. The work started in 1976 to 78. And the technology transfer agreement was signed in 91-92, implies 15 years. So basically, it was such a challenging product that it took 15 years from the initial beginning to the actually having the product in hand. And once again, heart wall is both a product and process innovation. Why? Because first of all, the Chitra wall, as it's popularly known, there was a conscious decision to go for safe and low cost materials. So the materials were all safe and were procured at much more lower cost. Okay, which kind of materials, what kind of things to be used, everything had to be done at Sri Chitra. And then also they had to create a process to produce this. So there were already heart walls that were available from MNCs, but this was completely different materials which was safe at lower cost. Given our low income or developing status, Chitra wall was made to cater that kind of a market. So now for this, they collaborated. I'll mention with respect to other textiles. Again, once the technology was ready, they contacted the NRDC. Now, in both these things, I'm not getting much into NRDC. I'm just assuming they are not there because their capabilities would have affected, but I don't have much information. But if you look at the recipient, the TTK Pharma was already a well-established company. It had more than products in more than 20 product categories, implying it would have had access to finance, marketing capabilities, and probably also, in some sense, better organization routines. But what is to be noted here is that even then, it took almost 5, it was not present in the medical equipments market, because of which it took almost 6 years for commercial production. So in that sense, even TTK Pharma, though it was a very established company, it took it 6 years for it to get the plant commercialized. Again, the medium was the same, which as I mentioned, I'll not mention that. But what's more important, I would want to bring you to your attention is that demand, the very important characteristic, demand was low. There is low demand, and in addition to being low demand, there is only, when you look at heart wall, hearts are of different sizes. So you have the diameter of the heart wall range from 17 mm to 33 mm. So in other words, from an economist point of view, economies of scale could not be achieved. Whereas the same thing could be achieved with respect to blood bags, because you uniformly of relatively, it's much more similar sizes. So here we had low demand, which implied smaller markets. Now, if you look at the impact, because this was a challenging product, on Sri Chitra, there was lots of positive impact. First of all, it got 1 patent, 2 design registrations, and its tool room engineers interacted with TTK almost on for many years, and then they developed a cryo machining technique. Cryo implies liquid nitrogen at very, very cool temperatures. They developed a cryo machining technique. They also went into vendor development, and they also designed a refrigerated cooling system. In some sense, that engineering became all the more awesome. So Chitra became a very, very good kind of engineering developer.
Chidambaram, Dr. Chidambaram, can you try to wind up in another 5 minutes?
Sure. Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yeah. So then with this, I'll skip the organization design, and also for respect to product development, there were lots of clinical trials, which again helped Sri Chitra improve its capabilities. There are more than too many clinical centers where they had feedback. So the product was very great, and the scientific and technology capability, again, training numerous people improved their capability. And with respect to monetary gains, it's almost 3.2 crores. They got an award, National R&D Award. So that was Sri Chitra's impact. Now, if you look at impact on recipient, which is TTK, it was able, by this time, the techno-proof facility had already come. So in that sense, they were able to produce 1,000 walls at Sri Chitra's facility, and the supply network was already well established. In that sense, production capabilities were greatly benefited by interaction from Chitra. And innovation capabilities, they on their own, they created a bit of testing and all those kind of stuff, which I will not get into. But with respect to market impact and economic development, you can see this. So with respect to backward linkages, still now the polymer and the cobalt alloy are still imported. So in that sense, there's some amount of import, and you can see that the metal frame machining happens at 2-3 places in this country. The lathes get manufactured from Coimbatore. The coolant system is generally locally fabricated. And the knitted polymer fabric, with whom Chitra collaborated for a long time, Chitra in Coimbatore, South India Textile Research Association, they give you the polymer fabric. But look at the other table. You can clearly see that the production numbers are small. You can see that initially the sales quantity, you started from 14, and it's not gone more than 4,000, if you can see the table. So if you can see on the list, so basically though it has 40% market share, the total number of walls that have been sold till now, until 2020, is around 1.6 lakh. So you can clearly see that the demand was low. So if you come to the competition, so basically initially, if you can see here, the price was much low, 12,000 rupees, the average selling price. So the price was much cheaper, so there is no competition. But the MNCs who had the substitute product, the mechanical heart walls, they started pricing using the exchange rate so as to keep it competitive. So in that sense, there was price competition even in Indian market. The MNC started using the exchange rate to play and to use price competition. So if that was domestic competition, what happened to exports? See, exports, the biggest problem was regulatory barriers. You had to get it tested as per their regulations. But even if you were able to do that, the kind of surgeons in other countries were typically West educated. So they always prefer the US FDA MNC kind of a thing. So overcoming their preferences was a much more bigger bottleneck. And even if they were able to, TTK was able to overcome both, there was always this threat of price competition from the MNCs. So you can see that from the table that not much, exports are not much. So in some sense, if I want to summarize, what would I say? First of all, the nascent stage of the medical device equipment ecosystem implied that the technology transfer was slow. You can see, I already mentioned it, quite some time, more than 5 years. But I'll summarize both the things in this table. I'll not get into this table for probably want of time. But with respect to the innovation systems literature, if you actually, Professor Rakesh Basant has mentioned in his book that there are two, at the national system of innovation, there are two innovation modes. First, the scientific and academic institutions through research generate new knowledge used by firms to produce innovation. And firms use formal and informal networks to learn while doing, using, and interacting. And a combination of both these modes has a stronger impact, which I believe is, the two case studies that I have discussed is an empirical evidence for this statement. So that is with respect to the innovation systems literature. Now, coming to the policy implications, now what's very clear is that if there is huge demand, which we have seen as in blood bags case, there are the chances of more linkages and more economic opportunities. Whereas if there is lower demand, linkages and economic opportunities are lower. But however, if it's a challenging product, it builds technological capability. But one cannot generalize it that one should always go for huge demand thing. But it's also very important to have technological capability. As I already mentioned, the blood bag came from the oxygenator. So in that sense, each lab probably, each CSR lab or each lab should probably offer a cluster of simple and complex products so as to achieve this equilibrium, which will be, I think, a case by case basis. So that's probably a policy implication which comes because most of them are government funded. So probably each lab can think about how to have maximum impact with respect to industrial development. So yeah. I'm thankful to and thank you. So this is Reggie.
Thank you, Dr. Chidambaram. It was a very interesting presentation. So your study shows the technology transfer occurs in different modes, like movement of people and training the personnel. So your study also highlights that the firms receiving technology, they should have some capability to absorb the technology. Like you have touched upon innovation capability, investment capability, different types of capability. And interestingly, your study also suggests that technology transfer can be a win-win deal. Both the parties would benefit. So now let us hear from our discussants. First, let us go with Dr. Dilip. Dr. Dilip, I had given a brief introduction to you before you joined.
Yes.
The floor is yours. So you have about 10 minutes.
So I was going through this, and also I was listening to Mr. Iyer. If I can know, because one thing I came to know, of course, the technology transfer really played a very important role. But when we see right from the technology transfer, till the production time, what was the time it took to do it? Say something that if can be mentioned by Mr. Iyer, it will be useful.
Maybe see whatever questions you have, you can pose it now, and
Okay.
Dr. Chidambaram can respond at the end.
Okay, sure. So one is that which I really look because in AMDZ we are thinking to translate those prototypes into a scalable model in just few months, which we have been doing it. So that will be interesting to know.
Okay, Dr. Chidambaram, would you like to respond now?
Yeah. See, I think I didn't mention this. See, I have mentioned this. With respect to Penpol, I said that the technology transfer agreement was signed in 84, 85, and the production actually started, the commercial production started almost by 87. So in that sense, it was almost 3 years to get the first commercial production in small batches. And regular commercial production started by 90. So you can say 5 to 6 years. And I have also mentioned that with respect to the heart valve also, it took almost 6 years. So in that sense, because it was nascent, the ecosystem was just around 5-6 years for the blood bag and heart valve. That could be a general ballpark.
And there is any common in between why there was 6 years or can be reduced in the study? Mr. Iyer,
Dr. Chidambaram, hello.
Yeah, see the point is, I don't know if you can rephrase your question. I'm not able to,
so I just want to know, as you said, both took 6 years, approximately. So do we have the data that what took that much time in for the
I
production?
wish, see, the
Is it
point is,
anything something common?
see, I wish one could get data, but all the information that I've gleaned is, from getting through, because you can very well understand that, it's now almost, one of the reasons is almost 40 years now.
Yeah.
So, and first of all, as you may know very well, said that failures, nobody wants to talk about failures. So one of the reasons I have not taken technology transfer, it's only success cases. And even in these cases, the
Okay.
documentation is so poor that,
Okay.
that because you are working in the industry, that everybody wants is action oriented, and getting it documented is a huge challenge, because there are so many day-to-day problems that by the time you sit to documentation, you will see, you always say baad mein karenge, but the baad mein never comes. So which you can clearly see even in these cases. The point is, the kind of documentation I got was in kind of a memoirs of one of the founder IAS of the Penpol's founder, who has written a bit, not in great detail, but in that sense, yes, there were technological problems. The lab had, the kind of technology the lab developed, and the way it should have been commercialized, there was a huge step up. So in that sense, luckily, because the Penpol had a very experienced retired team, they were able to work on the deficiencies and come up with much more better scalable processes. So in that sense, so there's not much information. See, for example, I'll
Much.
tell you one
Got
thing, like if you look at the various testings that have to be done, like
Yes.
Penpol was a startup, it did not have HPLC. So it had just a very basic gas chromatograph. So they had to even get everything jugadu with respect to the gas chromatograph. So there were lots of day-to-day problems that happened. And so in that sense, not all the problems are documented. Few of them are documented. So
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Dilip, would you like to make any more comment?
No, I think maybe other panelists can comment, and I will just go through because I have joined lately.
Yeah. Okay. So now we will move to Dr. Ravi Rathod.
Yeah, hi, Rajiji, good evening. And let me first thank ISID for this invitation. And Dr. Iyer, many congratulations. You have done some fascinating, you have made some fascinating paper actually. Why? Because there are two different stories which you have highlighted in the paper. And this actually proves that not all technologies can scale in the same way, right? Because and on the as I represent the industry, from the industry perspective, the successful transfer requires much more than a license agreement, because what we can highlight from two different technologies and the partners, the recipients which you mentioned, like Pepnol, the HLL, and the TTK. What we can identify, what I have identified in the paper is basically we can highlight, the impact of technology is actually shaped by the demand. That's what you have highlighted. Like, for example, high volume, recurring needs, and all can drive the scale, create the jobs, lot of opportunities, growth industry, which we have seen in the blood bank technology. But now, why? Because the hospital needs millions of these technologies every year. And I think that was a perfect match of innovation with the recurring demand, right? Whereas the niche product like heart valve, it's a low volume innovation, which will build with the capability and affordability, as we have seen, right? Now, why? Because it's a niche product, fewer patients, but with a high and much complex technicality of this product. Now, see, there are two perspectives which industry take in demand. One is the scalable tech transfer. The second is, as we have seen, that everything we cannot do for the financial perspective, right? So in terms of heart valve, the impact can be measured by developing a domestic capability and making life savings implant more accessible and affordable to the country. So I would say so as an industry perspective, we see two models. One is scale-driven technology transfer for high volume disposables. The second is capability-driven tech transfer for the complex and low volume items. And as I have also highlighted earlier, from an industry perspective, when the tech transfer is being done, it's not just a licensing agreement, right? And never been a plug and play model for an industry. See, as Mr. Iyer highlighted, the Pepnol must have solved a lot of problem of their shop floor challenges, before their production got stable. The HLL have invested a huge amount of money to build the capacity. And the TKK has navigated those regulatory hurdles with regards to the technical complex product. Now, see, from an industry perspective, when the tech transfer happens, the main problem arrives at the TRL level 6 to 9, which everyone knows we can call it as a death valley. This is the gap between the lab invention and a commercially viable product, right? And many of the innovations, developed either at a government facility or a private facility research center are fail here. See, it is not like that those products are not scientifically strong, right? But because there is a gap and a breeze needed to fill that gap from a lab to market, because it includes a lot of things which the Mr. Iyer highlighted in the paper, like scaling the innovation, the regulators, assigning the vendors, the capitals, the market strategy, everything is missing, right? There in the innovations during 6 to 9 TRL. Now, industry is that bridge because the industry knows how to scale, how to manage the approvals, how to build the vendors, how to build the supply chain, how to access the demand, right? And structure our strategy. So the paper was good. I'll just have one input on the paper that we have highlighted a lot of things on the demand perspective. Both the examples are very good. What we can add on to that is, something on the policy level which you can highlight in your paper, right? That both the technologies, why one has grown, created jobs, opportunities, why the other has, not been that part, but still have a major effect on the affordability perspective. So on that front, Mr. Iyer can add few things like, for example, why? Because there are very few things available with the government level also if you want to if you want to scale your tech transfer, right? So for example, first, what the tech transfer need is a scale up support, right? Because at the government level, there is very few and schemes and grants are available to move the product from TRL 6 to 9. And see, if we can get the support, that will actually reduce the early production risk also. The second is procurement commitment from government, right? If I'm doing some tech transfer from a particular organization, right? There, as HLL invested a huge amount of money, it's not about demand only. See, for example, if some foreign investor wants to invest in India, right, for a new innovative product, then there should be some procurement commitment needed from the government side, not in terms of a direct agreement to buy this product, but a commitment from the government that once the technology will be commercialized in the country, we are here to procure that. I mean, we are ready, our market is ready to procure that technology so that the market risk can be, investment risk can be negotiated. The third is vendor development. Mr. Iyer very well presented those part also in the paper. Now, what we need is these scales and startups needs vendor support also. See, now there are a lot of new policies. So those were the older times, but now the government has a huge policy on Make in India, local content and all. Now, if I wanted to have some tech transfer and all, I need to see what all I can include from local critical inputs, how I can localize those critical inputs so that my local content can be more increased. And the last point is the support in terms of training and a structured capacity building support, which to for in this case to the lab staff, in other cases for the healthcare practitioners and all. Now, this is all I have highlighted on behalf of the government and industry as a recommendation or policy perspective, which can be added in the policy. Now, from the academia side or from the research institute side, also there are some responsibility, I would say, to highlight that they should consider industry as not just a recipient. We are actually the ultimate partner which can navigate this death valley and bring the innovation to the real world impact. So this is my point to highlight on the paper front, Rajiji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for your suggestions and comments. So Dr. Chidambaram can respond once we finish the discussion with the panelists. So now we will go to Dr. Gopa Kumar. Gopa?
Thank you, Reggie, and congratulations, Dr. Chidambaran, for telling us the story again. I think it's important to tell that story again and again. The only suggestion is that if you can update some of the data, to more recent times, like the exports or data, etc., can be updated, that would be very good. So having said this, 3 or 4 very broad remarks to highlight and underline the importance in the current context. I think economists try to look at everything from the perspective of scale, economic efficiency, and therefore to decide whether such local production happens or not. But from a public health perspective, I think it goes beyond the logic of efficiency. It's important to have local production because the concentration of production can threaten the health security. That is what we learned from the COVID-19 crisis. So therefore, it is important to have local production and much more diversified sources of products. So therefore, it is important to encourage the local production, though you can import sometimes the devices at a cheaper cost. So that's a sort of, I thought, a broad remark from this issue from a public health perspective. Definitely the domestic production, there are enough examples to show that, which resulted in competition and drastic price cuts, and therefore make these products affordable, both for the patients as well as for the government. So now from this story of these 2 examples, what we learned, I think the 4 important learnings. The first one is that there was a public health need mission mode approach. They identified that these are important and therefore to be addressed. And second, there was a public funding to develop these technologies by the public institutions. So, and third, the full hand-holding. And most important thing is that, at least in the case of blood bags, there was a trade policy intervention, which resulted in the increase of the import tariff to create that level playing field. So now, 40 years down the line, when we operate in a world where, in the Indian scenario, in a scenario where there are no industrial policy existing anymore in the country, or in to put it in another way, industrial policy is reduced as PLI scheme. So in that context, when we discuss, I think the key question is that we have so much in the pharmaceutical industry. As a result, replicate the same scenario or same situation in the case of medical devices, diagnostics, as well as for the emerging biopharmaceuticals. So when we look at that, the challenges are at least three challenges I would like to place. Important challenge is the trade policy. From the trade policy, I think three things are emerging out. One is, of course, the medical devices. I think this sector is known for or infamous for inverted duty structure. So if you import the parts, then it is more costly than the finished product. So that in a way discourages the domestic manufacturing. And second, the free trade agreements. So if one of the important tool and effective tool is tariffs. So now the free trade agreements have reduced these tariffs into zero, although it is projected as it gives the participation in the foreign government procurement market, but the reality is something different. Anyway, that's for another day. And third, Ravi mentioned here, there is a creative market that is through the government procurement market. So government procurement market, again, free trade agreement is opening up the government procurement market. So you have to compete with the foreign manufacturers. They would be able to, like a dumping kind of thing, they can do replicate that in the government structure. And there is also an existing problem with the many government procurement contract comes with the standards like USFDA approved. So this is a way of exclusion from the very beginning, putting this kind of standard. So these are all affecting this kind of policies are affecting the domestic production. And second is that the IMDRF, the standards, normally the standards or the regulatory standards are considered as science, and therefore they are the gold standard. IMDRF is the standard setting body now by the government, but initially it was a public-private, and the big companies played a major role in the setting the foundation of IMDRF. So if any manufacturers has to go, if our regulatory agencies is more and more open to the IMDRF standards, that can affect the local production and the technology transfer to the local level firms, because it makes it costly. And the third point is that the availability of funding. We do not have, a clear below market rate interest availability for funding for any of the industries in general, but especially in the context of medical devices. So what we require is a kind of a mission mode approach, and we need to look at from a based on health technology assessment, what devices are available elsewhere, not available locally produced in India. And from a health technology assessment basis, out of these technologies or devices, how many of them are very important for the Indian context? So based on that, I think there should be a mission mode R&D project to fill the gap and to provide funds and other facilities. So that takes me to my third point. Irrespective of all these constraints, there are a few initiatives which shows there was successful technology transfer. This is, I'm talking about from abroad to India, not through the joint ventures, but there are attempts like stent technologies were procured by the Indian companies from abroad, like a public research institutions. Similarly, some of the Indian medical devices company took over the foreign companies, from Europe, and successfully tried to integrate the technology. So these successes are there. Then, this industrial park itself is an innovation. So therefore, we need to look at all those things. But this particular story, which Chidambaran's paper says, is the successful technology transfer happened like a pre-liberalization era. And, with all this opening up and everything, still that firms could firmly, active in the market. So that's a successful story. And last comment, I would say that Chidambaran, it would be great to also to write more this kind of stories. One story I would like to suggest is that the intraocular lens technologies in India, which is, I think, one of the IITs involved in that. I think it's a Chennai IIT, and India became an sort of net exporter in that. Though we go for cataract surgeries, doctors suggest still a foreign lens, though India is a net exporter. Again, here comes the policy interventions are required to create a level playing field. So let me stop it here. And I think to put it in one sentence, I would say India needs to have an industrial policy approach, taking into account India's health security in the area of medical devices. Thank you.
Thank you, Gopa, for your suggestions and recommendations. Chidambaram, now you can respond to their questions and remarks they have made.
Sure, sure. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to all the panelists for taking the time and reading the paper and for the comments and suggestions. So now, with respect to Dr. Gopakumar's suggestions, yeah, I'm thankful for this intraocular lens. I will look into it and surely will try to work on it. And then I do agree that we should have more local production. Actually, I don't know, you may know better, but I feel that signing the WTO and getting the product patents probably played a we have completely stopped the process way. So because one of the reasons in the 80s, probably my understanding is limited, but I think that before TRIPS, we were able to, through process patents, we were able to increase our capabilities. But unfortunately, because we are now a WTO signee, we are not able to, if product patents are being there. So I'm not sure how that will, in a post-WTO regime, and especially India being accused for so many things of not protecting IPR, I'm not sure whether these kind of things will work today, but my guess is the reason we were able to produce the blood bag and heart wall was that probably product patents were not enforced then. But of course, you could correct me, but I do agree that we should encourage local production and we should have more capability development. And the mission mode, yes, I think from what I read, it's correct that whenever we are in mission mode, we do succeed a lot. So yeah, and I would try to change the exports data. If I get more data, I will surely share. I've not got, but I'll keep on looking for it. So thank you for all the comments and observations and the idea. And Dr. Ravi, again, yeah, with respect to your policy level things, yeah, all the points are very well taken. Actually, yeah, probably I can add a few points on scale up risk, vendor development support, capacity building training, and government procurement market. So I would think about ways of adding that in the paper. But with respect to what you said, industry being the partner, I completely agree on that. And as a matter of fact, I think that point has been made in a 87 annual report of Sri Chitra. As a matter of fact, there is, what I think is that there is also a realization at the academic level, but unfortunately, there is no institutional continuity at the academic side. So what you are saying has been well recognized. For example, the kind of problems that they faced because of blood bag, they have documented saying that from now on, anything that we develop, we have to first bring in our industry partners, take in their views, and then start on the lab process. So actually, what you are saying is it has been recognized, but I think it's got lost. There is no institutional continuity. The universities or the research labs, I don't know why, but that this message has not passed on. But actually, that's people have recognized, but unfortunately, what you're saying is true. So we need more interaction and start right from day zero. So if the university has some idea, it should actually look out for industrial partners and then work together. So I think I do completely agree on that. So thank you for that, for making that point, and which I think is very, very valid. And I think that's all, Ravi, Reggie. I think.
Yeah. Just one point, Ayerji, on the same front, because why I have highlighted this point is because 70% of new innovative products, doesn't materialize into the market commercial level. Why? Because they don't involve industry from the start. Now government has also recognized this, and I would say now whatever new schemes and grants coming up at the government level, either it is a nodal ministry as Department of Pharma or Ministry of Electronics and IT, Now they are making a mandate, for the industry also to have some academia partner, for getting the benefits of the schemes and benefits of the grant. Now, this should be same replicated for academia also, right? If they are developing any new product or something which is at an innovative level, from the start itself, they should involve the industry so that the product will, once it's it is actually at the market level, it is ready to be accepted in the market. So that's what the point, but thank you for highlighting that.
Ravi, you are right that industry academia collaboration is something in which India is lacking very much. And the government has realized this, and I think the schemes such as Anusandhan National Research Foundation, I think it is developing some schemes which will probably address or facilitate industry academia collaboration. Let us wait and see. So, Dr. Dilip, you said at the end you will make some remarks. So, would you like to make any remarks now?
Yeah. I think that is where one is also I want to mention about the health technology assessment which has taken up by Directorate of Health Research, and now globally it is accepted by many institutes where any technologies is coming up, we are asking for health technology assessment, which plays a very crucial role in during the technology transfer, or entering into a public health system, also public procurement system. This is important. If we can highlight that, that is also very crucial.
Yeah. Dr. Chidambaram, do you have any response to that?
No, I think no, I
think
don't know. Probably Mr. Gopakumar has actually raised this.
I think it's a suggestion. Okay. So now, Gopa, would you like to make any point?
Yeah. I think when we talk about technology transfer, I think nowadays innovative products, right? But I think it's also important that there are products existing elsewhere, not here. So therefore, local, and the purpose of technology transfer also, local production should be one of the important objective of technology transfer. From that perspective, I think some of the existing products, to be initiate local production. So to that purpose, we also need to there should be a kind of vertical like that, along with whatever innovations going to take place, new kind of devices, or the existing devices, you add new features or new make it much more innovative. But I think it's important to one of the objectives should be kind of technological emulation for initiating local production. And second, I think one of the problem, along with again with the standards about medical device, is that there is no common nomenclature for devices. Like medicines, we have international non-proprietary names. Paracetamol, whoever produces that particular chemical is paracetamol, known as paracetamol. But in the devices, it's not that everybody is saying that their product is novel, their product is new. Somebody say that our design is slightly different, therefore, therefore it is different new product. Okay, or so like that, everybody try to make that differentiation. So it's a big politics there involved, because the big companies are sort of blocking to develop a common nomenclature on devices. I think India should have this work is somehow got blocked in the WHO with all efforts of AMID and all. I think we should have our own. And the last one more point is that like trade policy, the price control on stents and the price control on implants shows that somehow the domestic manufacturers can get a level playing field in that. So if a company, a multinational company which do not have enough market network and investment in the country, when a price control comes, they won't able to sustain in the market. That share actually goes to the domestic manufacturer. So it's an price control is to be considered also as an industrial policy approach, and it's important to have it. And last, on impact of patents, I think impact of patent is not that much affecting the medical devices, like as it is affecting the pharmaceutical products, like chemicals, etc. Because here the game is like this: with a single patent, you Chidambaran, you know that as a chemical engineer, you can control the entire molecule with a single patent, but that's not possible with many of the medical devices, especially those devices involving electronics. So you cannot control with a single patent, but there are patent tickets can happen. But I think it is other policies which are preventing the local manufacturing. Basically, the lack of public funding to a mission-oriented reverse engineering or technological emulation. If some people may find reverse engineering is abusive word, but so let us be fashionable, technological emulation. So that is what we require. Thank you.
Thank you, Gopa. Very important observations. And now we will open the floor for discussion. If anyone wants to raise any question or share any comment, please raise their hands, or they can share their views in the chat box. I will read it out. Okay. So I think there is no hands being raised. So thank you everyone for this very stimulating presentation. Thank you, Chidambaram. Thank you, all the panelists and all the participants online. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
you, Chidambaram. Thanks.
Mr. Iyer,
Thank you.
for the wonderful paper and all. We hope actually, as Dr. Gopa Kumar sir has very well highlighted all the policy related challenges and issue for the medtech industry. We are at a very nascent stage, right? And to scale this industry, we want like a pharma, right? We need a whole ecosystem level policy support from the government, right? Which is either in terms of the regulatory harmonization, in terms of the public procurement policies, the global tender inquiry list, the unnecessary policies also which demotivate, domestic production like import of refurbished medical equipments, which is allowed, right? The main point highlighted Gopa Kumar sir was on the generic nomenclatures. That's a very valid point, sir, and we face this that a lot in terms of, in every license. If I am a cath lab manufacturer, if you are also cath lab manufacturers, our both licenses will have a different nomenclature of our product. That is, I can say, at a regulatory perspective. So this nomenclature point harmonization is also very important. So that's one thing. If you can, anytime, if we can discuss more on the policy perspective, what we all need to enable the policy ecosystem for the growth of the medical device industry, we will be very happy to share the note on that. Thank you.
So Ravi, just one clarification, this import of refurbished medical devices. So earlier it was very liberal. I thought some restrictions were imposed on the import of such products. Is it not correct?
I'll tell you, sir. So basically, the refurbished medical equipments are not regulated, which means that currently there is no rules and regulations mentioned in the MDR 2017 for regulating the refurbished medical equipments. Based on that, the CDSCO has shared a communication with the board officers that as there is no regulations, these equipment should not be allowed in the market or should not be allowed in India. But still, there is a different ministry called Ministry of Environment of Forest and Climate Change. They have released a notification, they form the committee and they issue approvals and NOCs sometimes, right, to import those equipments. So there are different ways and loopholes to bypass the regulations also.
Okay.
apart from that, you see the audacity is in the government operated events like the India MedTech Expo recently held. Before that, there is an exhibition at the Bharat Mandapam also. All these big professional events where all the government dignitaries are also there. There you can see the exhibition stall of a company who actually deals in refurbished medical equipments only, right? So one time we say that it is not allowed. On the second hand, we can see the open sell and promotion of the refurb medical equipment in the government event itself. Now there are two perspectives onto that, Reggie and Gopakumar sir. So there are two lists. One is a global tender inquiry list. Second is the import of refurbished medical equipment. Now, as a domestic manufacturer, when I go into the market, when I apply for any government tenders and all, either for a newer technologies and anything, right? In the public procurement, we will face a difficulty because of the GT list, right? Though we have enough capacity to cater the domestic demand and also supply to the export market, till the item is in global tender inquiry list, so that you will face a competition in the public market, public procurement through the GT list. One. On the other hand, when you go to private market, you will never be able to compete with the cost of refurbished medical equipments, right? So for domestic manufacture, it is very discouraging to invest in India, and though not able to cater to private and public both. So that's the audacity of our policy system, which actually we are highlighting at a lot of platforms, and government has started taking actions. The only need is the proper monitoring and implementation of those notifications.
Okay. So probably we can meet sometime when Gopa is also around.
Ravi, but there should be, yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think, there should be heavy duty on the refurbished products, right?
No, sir.
Because you cannot import a second-hand car to the country. Okay.
Zero duty,
It is
sir.
150% duty.
It's zero duty here.
So the duty is the most important, right? And most effective to discourage. So probably, the industry academic collaboration, I think, Veena and all, should interact with Ravi and even AMTIZ and all, much more, you people should form a kind of steady group on this issue and to publish and organize something, because these are very important issues and, get ignored.
Good idea, Gopa. Good idea. We will take it forward.
I think there is one comment in the chat box.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
I was just going through Dr. Chidambaram's talk, and there was a delay of almost 6 years in delivering that implant, that heart valve from Sri Chitra. I was just pondering over what could be the reasons behind. So in any other future venture, can we have a team from the very beginning of biomedical experts, material science experts, and the regulatory bodies, so that what's your comment about it? Can that curtail the delay? Am I audible?
I'll tell you, sir, there is definitely a need of such committees whenever there is a development of a new product. Even the ministry has recognized this importance. And now in all ministerial funded projects also, for example, Ministry of Electronics and IT, they form a working group of members where the members are from technical background, the members are from clinical background, the members are from the industrial background, so that whatever projects being funded by the ministry, that will be monitored and approved by that committee, right? And there has been a quarterly meetings of all those milestones being reviewed by this committee. I specifically know because I'm a part of that R&D working group of Ministry of Electronics and IT, right? And we see the projects funded by the ministry to different IITs and all. So that's a very much important point.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay, okay, then we'll wind up. Thank you, everyone.